Alarm rings. We get up. Coffee, messages, responsibilities. The day begins much like yesterday, and tomorrow it will probably begin the same way. There is nothing unusual about this. In fact, it is so ordinary that most of us hardly notice it. But every now and then, usually on a quiet morning, a strange thought appears. We look ahead at everything that still needs to be done and wonder what exactly all this is leading. The road ahead suddenly seems very long. The ancient Greeks told many stories, stories of heroes and monsters, of wars and prophecies. But there is one story that always stayed with me. Perhaps because it contains no great battle, no hidden treasure, no final victory. Only a man, a mountain, and a stone. His name was Sisyphus. Sisyphus was a king, a clever king. The sort of man who believed every problem had a loophole if you were smart enough to find it. He escaped consequences that should have caught him. He outwitted those around him. With every success, his confidence grew, and his confidence became pride, and eventually his pride became something even larger. The belief that he could outsmart anything, even death. Stories say that when death finally came for him, Sisyphus tricked it. Just imagine beating the one opponent every human being eventually faces. Imagine standing there, convinced that the rules no longer applied to you. For a brief moment, Sisyphus must have felt untouchable. But gods waited. And when the time came, they chose a punishment unlike any other. No fire, no torture, not darkness. A mountain. At its base rested an enormous stone. His task was simple: push the stone to the summit. That was all. So Sisyphus placed his hands against the rock and began to climb. The stone moved slowly. Every step demanded effort. The path was steep. Air grew thinner. The summit seemed impossibly far away. Still he climbed. One step, then another, until finally he neared the top. And then it happened. The stone slipped. I often find myself wondering about that moment. The instant when Sisyphus realized what was about to happen. When his hands felt the weight shifting. When hope became certainty when he knew the stone was not staying. The rock gathered speed, bouncing, rolling, crashing down the mountainside until it vanished into the valley below. Silence. The summit stood empty. Far beneath him sat the stone, exactly where it had begun, and there was nothing to do except walk back down. Whenever I picture Sisyphus, this is the image that comes to my mind. The walk down, the long, quiet journey towards a task he knows must be repeated. There is something haunting about that walk down the mountain. No surprises, no mystery, just the long road back to the stone. Maybe that is why the image stays with me. Sisyphus pushed the stone again and again and again. Days became years. Years became centuries. The mountain never changed. The stone never changed. The task never changed. Perhaps that is why people have remembered this story for thousands of years. Not because many of us fear mountains, but because all us know repetition. Most of life is made of things that return. The same responsibilities, the same worries, the same unfinished work. And yet we spend much of our lives staring at distant summits, believing that everything will finally make sense once we arrive. Once we earn enough, achieve enough, become enough. But the older I get, the more curious I became about that idea. Because whenever one summit is reached, another somehow appears. The mountain simply changes shape. The climb continues. And perhaps that is why the story survived. Every generation seems to find itself somewhere on that mountain. The strange thing is that when we are young, we imagine life happens during extraordinary moments. Wedding, promotion, victory. But if we look carefully, those moments are brief. Most of life happens elsewhere, in ordinary afternoons, in repeated routines, in work that no one applauds, in steps that seem to lead nowhere. And yet, those steps became a life. Sometimes I wonder whether Sisyphus ever stopped hoping, whether after centuries of climbing, he still looked at the summit and imagined that perhaps this time the stone would stay. The story never tells us. It leaves him there, hands against the rock, beginning another climb. Perhaps that is why the story endures, because it never offers an answer, only an image, a man, a mountain, and a stone. Tomorrow morning, somewhere in the imagination of humanity, Sisyphus will begin again. And tomorrow morning, millions of people will rise to meet their own mountains. Ancient Greeks left Sisyphus on the hillside, still pushing, and perhaps there is something worth remembering in that. Despite everything, he placed his hands against the stone once more and climbed.